push that lawn. Think of it like spring, literally. And you can make your lawn so beautiful just by doing those things in a very short time, like 8 weeks. You could have a gorgeous lawn just from doing that. All right, next, let's go to Rick. And we got a warm season one here. Rick's got St. Augustine grass. So I told you guys we would get to you. So here we go, Rick. But he sent me a series of emails, and let's see if I can read a spot here. Oh, man. I should have organized this one a little bit better. He has my guide. I'm at my wit's end. My St. Augustine lawn, I live in Miami, Florida, and I have a very large lawn, about 17,000 square feet. When I bought my house about 2 years ago, the front lawn had in-ground irrigation and had been partly well-maintained without much effort. My backyard is a completely different story. It did not initially have in-ground sprinklers, and I attempted to get it with a hose-in sprinklers after spending several $1,000s on resodding my backyard. 1 year after resodding, my backyard was back to square one, mostly dead and full of weeds. About 3 months ago, I went ahead and added an in-ground irrigation to the backyard, and I have resodded the backyard again. Now I'm starting to fear that the grass is dying again, and it's going to crash and burn. I tried True Green Service for about a year. That didn't work. I have cameras throughout my property, and they would ghost my lawn. Oh, gosh. Sorry, buddy. I'm now attempting to get it back on track. Attached are several pictures of my lawn and my backyard. Any input would be great. Okay, that's where we're at. So his front yard is fine. It's had irrigation. The backyard has not had irrigation, and it was sodded. He tried to water it by hand. He couldn't keep up with it. I'm assuming he must have done that sometime outside of the rainy season, because we rain all here in the summer, all through like June, July, August, and into September. We get rain every day in South Florida, so he must have tried to do this at another point, maybe like in the spring when it's our dry season. But either way, it died. Now he's resodded again, and he's afraid he's going to have the same issue, even though now he does have in-ground sprinklers. So as I'm looking at it, the first thing I would say is get a soil test. Let's just make sure there's nothing crazy going on in the soil. I don't know. I just should make sure. Sometimes the pH can be crazy. You don't know what's been trucked in there. It's really pH that I'm looking at. So do that. Get a soil. It's not about what nutrients are there or not, even though that's very important. It's about the pH. Is it super high, super low? Let's figure that out. Now, when he sends me these pictures, though, what I'm seeing is I'm seeing a lawn that is fairly sparse in a lot of places. Now, where he sodded it, it's not necessarily sparse, even though it looks like it's starting to go thin, but it's yellow. So yellow is a challenge. Now, yellow, sometimes people automatically think when they see a lawn that's yellow, they think that it's take-all patch or take-all root rot, and it can be, but more than likely, usually what it is it's the grass, is the St. Augustine is not getting the proper nutrient from the soil, and in a lot of cases, it's iron. So what I recommend when you see yellow St. Augustine grass, because even if it's root rot, this will help. So let's mark this down. When you see your St. Augustine grass is yellow throughout, or even if it's some green, some yellow. If some of the blades are green and some of the greens are yellow and it's interspersed, that's usually the take-all root rot. But even so, if it's yellow, what you want to do is you need to get nutrient into it right away. And one of the advantages of St. Augustine grass is it has these big, fat grass blades. People don't like those because they're not comfortable to walk on. They're crunchy. They call it crabgrass, which irritates me to no end. But the advantage there is those big fat grass blades can catch some liquid like satellite dishes, man. You know, like the kid with big ears that you used to make fun of. He's like, yeah, but I could hear better than you, brah. And that St. Augustine grass, that big fat St. Augustine grass you like to make fun of, it can catch some liquids. So I would get a liquid that has the ability to absorb through the foliage. Now, the way that's going to happen is it's got to be very small particle size, or I guess the generic word would be thin. Can't be a thick liquid, and it has to have very small size of particle that can absorb through the grass blades. And we have a product like that, the 700 Greene Effect. It is the secret weapon for St. Augustine grass. Now, it'll work on all grass types, but it works real well on St. Augustine grass, and that's really what it was developed for, is chlorotic turf, is what we call this condition. When you see St. Augustine grass, it's all yellow. It's chlorotic. It needs iron. And you put this in your pump sprayer, and you put it on in a fine mist, and it absorbs, and it literally will turn the grass green within hours, but definitely by the next day. So let it sit for 30 minutes or so. Most of the absorption takes place within a few minutes, but let it sit for 30 minutes. There'll be like this sheen to the grass blades, in fact. And then you can water it in if you want, or just leave it. You don't have to, but you don't have to water it in. But it will absorb through the grass blades. And what that does is it allows the grass to start photosynthesizing again. It gives it the nutrient that it needs. It's kind of similar to, John Perry taught me that you can feed trees fertilizer through their trunks. Now, not palm trees. Palm trees are essentially a big grass. I'm talking about oak trees, deciduous trees, right? Oaks, ash. You can actually spray fertilizer on their trunks, and they will take the fertilizer in through the trunks, and then that xylem and phloem gets through that cadmium layer or whatever. I'm saying things I don't necessarily know a lot about, but it'll get in there. It'll get in that way, and it won't even need to feed from its roots. And this is the same similar way that the St. Augustine grass does it, except it's doing through its blades, its leaves. That will turn the grass green, but it will also, like I said, strengthen it by giving it a little shot of nitrogen, because it's 700. There's some nitrogen in there. And there's also some iron. The way that works is it's got an adjuvant in it called citric acid. So he cuts it with citric acid, which makes it a very thin mixture so that it can be absorbed that way. So that's the first thing you do with St. Augustine that is struggling in this way. And again, you got your soil test, because if your pH is off, you're going to have to correct it. But that's the first thing I would do. From there, obviously, make sure you have your irrigation in line. We are now in the summer. We are getting rain every other day. And in fact, here in Florida, we've had rain for 3 days straight now. Pretty heavy all day, probably more than we want. But that's what you want to do. And then you want to go ahead and get some good micros and macros into that lawn. The thing about St. Augustine grass is it will send out those stolons. I've mentioned this earlier in the podcast. I'll mention it again. It only has to send stolons to thicken, to spread, to fill in those thin areas that you have. So it doesn't have to focus on rhizomes at the same time like the Bermuda or the zoysia do. They got to focus on, so here's the thing. Bermuda and zoysia have to focus on 4 things: roots, rhizomes, stolons, and top growth. Those 4 things. St. Augustine has one less. It only has to focus on roots and stolons and top growth. So it has one less thing to focus on, so it can put more of its energy into those stolons. And the way that you also encourage that is to mow it more often. If you mow it more often, it will encourage it to spread out more. The other thing naturally I see is that when there is a thin spot, it will spread the nodes, and it won't push up a lot of, out of the new nodes, it doesn't push up a lot of top growth real fast. It spends most of its time spreading. It can sense, like when it's not packed around, it can sense that there's more opportunity to spread wide than spread tall. It's kind of interesting how the grass does that. It's just its natural growth habit. It will take over those thin spots. Now you want to make sure that you're getting some potassium in there as well, because that supports all different functions in the plant. And then the other secret, again, is sea kelp. Whether you get sea kelp from us or not, it's those cytokines, it's those hormones that are in there that stimulate more rooting and more shooting. RGS is the one we have, root growth stimulant. There's all kind of different ones, but I'm telling you that sea kelp, man, that is the secret to really pushing a warm season turf to put out a whole lot more. So I would make sure I was doing that, feeding it good, give it that first foliar spray, get things kicked off, get things moving. The other thing that he does have in his lawn is some kalinga, which is a sedge. We all have kalinga right now. If you have St. Augustine grass and you're seeing a lot of pale, very thin looking, looks like grass. If you're seeing that, that's kalinga. It'll get a little spur on the top of it, not a sand spur, but it'll get a little spur with 3 little shoots around it. That is kalinga, and you want to use halosafuron for that. We used to call that sedgehammer. That's the brand name, but you can get halosafuron generically now. It does take a while to work, even though I sprayed it pretty heavy-handed over at the church the other day, and I got pretty good results in like 2 weeks. So actually a week. So you want to use a surfactant with that and a finer mist, but halosafuron will help you. Definitely a fine mist is important though when it's kalinga, because it has such small stalklets over by there. So